Yeah, so I started wearing protective gear so I could rinse it off, take it off, and then go on with my day without really offending anybody within a 20-foot radius. So all kinds of things go in those pots. Scup or porgy, lobsters, obviously, spider crabs. Holy cow, do we get spider crabs around here. So many, in fact, that I think my record to date is 47 in one pot. So the pot's a pretty good size. That's still a lot of spider crabs. They are related to Dungeness crabs. Now, if you took the big front claws there and got like 100 of them, and you steamed them for a couple of minutes, they would taste a little bit like Dungeness crab, but you'd need so many, it's just not worth it. The rest of the crab is so vile, nothing else in the ocean eats it. So I had one of these things on the left-hand side of my pot one day, and I thought it might be a stingray, and I was terrified to touch it. I wouldn't remove it from the pot, but I didn't want it to die. So I was lucky that day. My husband was with me. I asked him to do it, and he did. He was scared of it too. So the thing had to roll up like a burrito to get in there, but it did. So did this other thing. So in the meantime, I was trying to learn to fish, and around here, you go fluke fishing. That's just what you do, and that's flounder. Well, the first one I caught that was legal size was in my lobster pot. It wasn't even on a line. It was exactly legal size again, and it is flat fish. It rolled up like a burrito to get in there, and it did, but it couldn't get out. That was the most delicious dinner. I didn't catch any lobsters that day, and I didn't care. Dinner was still good. So also appearing black sea bass, conch, all kinds of things. I like the photo on the right-hand side. See how one of the claws is really, really small? Lobsters lose claws all the time, and they grow them back. And you can tell them when they're growing back because they're tiny like this. So not only do predators grab them, they'll also throw a claw, get rid of a claw if they're trying to get away from something big and nasty, like, frankly, another big lobster. So every once in a while, we get something that was magical. This is one of those days. We had five lobsters in the pot. Very unusual, very fun. Just like winning the lottery. It's really fun. I never know what's going to be in there, and this is always exciting. So early on, I didn't give them fun names or anything. I was planning on eating them or donating them somewhere, so it didn't matter. But everybody had a number. All the lobsters were numbered for the season. I like this one. He was doing yoga when I pulled him up. So some lobsters actually have no claws. I just call them a snack because there's not only half the meat, but there's literally no protection whatsoever. None. So that thing was going to die no matter whether I caught it or I didn't. It didn't matter at that point. And if it's missing one claw, it's called a cull. By the way, fun fact, if you're shopping for lobster from a local seafood counter, the culls have more meat per pound than any other kind of lobster. And that's one right there. See how his thumb is damaged? He had just been in a fight, like hours earlier. That was so raw and so new. Now something else, he got away from that something by going in my pot, but then he was still there when I checked it, so. Lobsters eat each other. They're cannibals. They're disgusting. This helped me to overcome my squeamishness about sticking them in boiling water. So they break fingers. Everything in the ocean loves lobster eggs, by the way. And we kind of covered some of these things, except this last one was a big surprise to me. I had no idea that lobsters actually need oxygen. So if you get a lobster, even from the grocery store, and you just put it in a bucket of salt water, it dies. It needs circulating air. But if you take that same lobster, and no kidding, this was so gross to me at first, and now it doesn't faze me. If you put it in, with the bands on, so it can't hurt you, obviously. If you put it inside a paper bag and put it in your refrigerator, it'll just take a nap and wait for you to cook it. And it's fine because it can breathe air. I know, that's just the weirdest. It's just a really odd creature. By the way, if you think that this is the grossest thing ever, why would anybody do this to this animal? Lobsters don't actually have brains. They just have instincts. They literally have no brains. So they're just big bugs that taste good with butter. we already covered that, so I'm going to skip back. So what could go wrong? Well, I found out in a couple of different storms that even though it's mostly a cage, there's a couple of bricks on the bottom, when a big storm waves come in, they actually throw the lobster pots up on the breakwater and that destroys them. And what's on the right-hand side is not one of my pots, but it's called a ghost pot. When that very lightweight buoy that's attached to the rope that's attached down to the pot, when something happens to that buoy, there's nothing attached to the pot anymore, it's gone. And there was only one time out of the 9 pots I lost over a couple of years, there's only one time that I found that pot again. But you can grab them with your anchor, which I did twice in one day. So this is a picture of me after I actually dove down where I was pretty sure the lobster pot was, and I found the lobster pot and there was a lobster in it. That was the only time I did that. My husband was terrified. He said, I don't care, I'll get a new pot, I don't want a new wife. So some of the other things that go wrong, weather. We've had fog roll in so fast that if we didn't have electronics, it would be hard to get back in safely because there are hazards going in and out. And this picture on the right-hand side is an overturned boat. It happens to be a 16-foot boat. I was listening to the radio when this happened. So a crew of 2 men was coming around the east side of Fisher's Island, which is right off the coast of Stonington. And the waves were kind of choppy, and what happened was they were coming through some waves, and they went over a lobster pot, and the propeller wrapped the cord, the rope right around it. And in a matter of seconds, they were in the water, and the boat was upside down. Had they not been wearing life jackets, they might have died. It took somebody 35 minutes to find them, even though the one man managed to keep his phone out of the water and keep telling somebody where they were. It took 35 minutes. And I always say, I've got very strict rules on my boat. You're on my boat, you're wearing a life jacket, period. I don't care. I am not explaining to your loved ones why you died while you were out having fun with me. I'm just not doing it, and I'm a jerk about it too. You come on my boat, I show you where the emergency beacon is. I make you put on the life jacket, and I show you where the life jacket is, and I show you how to use my radio. And if you can't remember anything else, I show you where that red button is, that if you press it, help comes. It just does. We spent more money on that radio than we spent on anything for the boat, because frankly, it could save our lives, and it's worth it. And frankly, there were too many times I saw stuff like this happen. We were listening to the radio one day fishing. I didn't realize how hard I was just grabbing this microphone. I freaked out even thinking about this. It's a very hard day. Another day, a woman's husband decided to go for a swim off the boat. And she called for help because she didn't know how to maneuver the boat. She had no idea. It wasn't her boat. She'd never been on it, really. It was his boat. She came out. So he went for a swim. Well, he didn't come back. The Coast Guard found him washed up on shore. She had no idea how to handle that boat. And it's a safety issue. So the other thing I ran into, which was kind of sad, people stole our lobsters and we started locking the individual pots up. But also the commercial lobstermen, one in particular, when I was out all by myself, right near that scary pile of rocks, right, the breakwater, came by me at full speed trying to swamp me because he was mad that I was somewhere he wanted to be. There are no assigned spots. I was allowed to be there. And he was really a jerk when it was so obviously just me. And he didn't care that it was dangerous for me. He was just mad, you know? People are like that. So it's always something. Sometimes just squeezing underneath that railroad bridge. That's always fun. I have tangled my own propeller in my own pots. And yes, I've called for help. Once because the engine was on fire, and once because I had wrapped the propeller around my own rope. So I learned a lot of cool things, though. I've learned perseverance, grit, if you will. I've really learned to respect nature. I've learned about the commercial fishing industry around here. I've learned more about really the whole ecology. And every time I bring up that pot, there's something in there I haven't seen before. And it's really interesting. There's just so much. And I just talked to all kinds of people about how amazing it is to live around here and have all these things. So, I mean, you got to see what it looks like to catch lobsters, and that's all fun, but I just learned a lot of cool things. So I've also really just learned to appreciate nature's beauty. There was one day I didn't catch any lobsters, but I got this beautiful picture of a monarch butterfly, and I'm just really happy about it. These birds were just a hoot. They didn't care that I was there. They were just hanging out. That's just what they do. That flounder, wow, that was fun to catch. That was a little bigger than average, and that made really good food. I've learned how to boil lobster, of course. You may have guessed that. But also I've made my own recipes, and I've learned to be creative with it. When I had lots of lobster and I was getting sick of it, I never had, by the way, a lack of anybody who wanted lobster. That was not a problem whatsoever. But one of the things I came up with was lobster mashed potatoes with buttery lobster flavored mashed potatoes, big chunk of lobster, and that little cream puff. And I made those for my stepmom's 80th birthday. Man, were they a hit. Also, grilled lobster's fabulous. And classic boiled lobster. I boiled so many lobsters. So I love this. So there's a local restaurant that makes something like this, and I found I've been a pretty good mimic with my recipes. Big pieces of deep fried lobster dipped in sauce taste just like a gigantic shrimp. They're fabulous. I love sharing. That's my stepmom on the left. Just about nobody else in my family actually likes lobster, which I thought was hysterical. But I could give her 5 and she'd eat all of them and be thrilled because my dad didn't like lobster. And that's my granddaughter right there. We had a particularly fun day. I only get to see her a couple times a year. She lives an hour away, but you know, everybody's busy. So when she gets to go out on the boat and we catch lobster, she could put a couple away with butter. It's been fun teaching her. It's been fun teaching other people who've never fished or been out on a boat before. One of the things I found out about guys that I totally did not know before is they don't like to just get together and hang out. They like to be doing something. You know what qualifies as doing something? Holding a fishing pole. Doesn't matter if you're catching anything. Guys will sit and visit. Well, one of the things that happened was my husband reconnected with some really old friends. And he invited everybody on the boat, and we'd hang out. And that's my cute daughter on the right. So Danielle happens to be here. That's her. And this is my friend Meredith, and we just had a really good time out there. Some of these people you might recognize, some of them you won't. They come from all backgrounds, and whether it was overcast and kind of chilly, you know, hence the winter hat, even though we were on the water, or it was sunny, it was still fun. It's quality time for a few hours on the water. I had not grown up with that. I had no concept of how having some place to meet and something relaxing to do could prompt conversation. It's been a blast. So this area is beautiful. Being on the water is beautiful. And every once in a while I've caught some really good photos. I have not really been sailing, but that's okay. I don't mind that I haven't been sailing, but these boats are so beautiful on the water. So I have these two up here in particular because the one on the left it was a bright sunny day. The fog rolled in so fast that if I hadn't had electronics, I wouldn't have made it back into my harbor safely. By the way, that's another thing I've learned. Safe harbor has a real meaning for me now. I understand how getting back to a certain spot is where you're safe. I know what that feels like now. By the way, the first time I got stuck on something and I just couldn't go anywhere for a while, a couple of hours actually stuck on something, one of those ghost pots, I bounced around for hours before I figured out what to do. That's how I found out I don't get seasick. I know, who knew? So the picture on the right I'm really proud of. That was a really nasty storm coming in. And I took the time to take that picture, and the reason why I did was it was beautiful, but it was also very foreboding. And I knew that I needed to get back in and get secure before I got poured on. You remember the picture of my little boat? There's no protection. If it starts raining, I have rain gear. I have to wear the protection. I don't have an umbrella, I don't have a cover, it's just this little dinky boat, and I love it, grateful for it, but I don't have any protection. I love this. You know what? When it's early in the morning, and it's this beautiful, you just sigh and say, isn't this a beautiful place to live? I am so blessed. So, I learned all kinds of new things. Boat handling, of course. I can fish competently now. I kind of even know where some of the fish are. I can read nautical charts. Not great, but enough to get me around. I can catch lobster. I can fillet and cook fish. I'm a competent cook, but that was really a blind spot. And I can sharpen knives better now, and I've created some good recipes. I'm really proud of that. Some of them are in my book because that was just a compilation of whatever I felt like writing about. This is so cool. This is a flounder or a fluke. Now, if you're really not a nautical person or a fish person, you probably don't know this, but fluke is dark brown on one side and very white on the other side. The brown side has both eyes, which I thought was kind of weird looking. So on the far left is the outside dark skin and the fillet that's under it. On the right, far right, is the white skin and the fillet under it. They taste exactly the same. They are the same fish, the exact same fish. And I'm really glad I took this photo when I did because it's turned out to be useful on so many levels. So I was having all this fun bringing people on the boat, but I realized it was a limit. I've got a small boat. I don't go out every day. I'm not a charter. How do I share with people? Decided to write about it. I expected this to just be for my family. And it's fun, and it's kind of written like, I've invited you on the boat, here's what I learned. Oh, by the way, did I tell you how weird it was to find out how important sunglasses are, really good sunglasses? Because you can't see things in glare, and when you're out in the water, that could be the difference between being safe or not safe. All kinds of stuff. Black Friday, I'm out looking for fishing boots, not pretty shoes. So that allowed me to meet other authors, which was really fun. And actually it launched a whole writing career. I didn't know that at the time. So thisismystic.com is a local website. I was approached by the owners and asked if I wanted to submit some columns. At first I was writing about fishing and lobstering and things, and I said, well, it'd be fun to write about restaurants that were accessible by water. And that started a whole series of restaurant reviews, which were so much fun. And that turned into a chance to, for 4 years, be the marketing director for a local and very best-selling author of children's books. All kinds of articles, all kinds of publications, radio and TV interviews. For 3 years and up until this month, I was the editor and primary writer of Mystic Neighbors magazine. And one of the things that was cool about that is that allowed me to use all those photography skills I developed. So I've applied everything I've learned one way or the other. And effective this month, in fact, there's copies in the back, I'm the new food columnist for Soundwaves magazine, which has been in existence for 32 years in southeastern Connecticut and southwestern Rhode Island. I highly recommend trying new things, even if you fail. I have failed my way to success in life over and over again because I was willing to try things other people weren't, and I was willing to fail publicly. Really, it's a funny pattern in my life. But the other thing I did with this book is I preserved memories. There's a whole chapter about my husband growing up in Nowink and how he inspired this whole weird hobby I have. There's a whole chapter that has recipes because I knew I was coming up with things maybe somebody else hadn't. But I'm hoping this inspires you a little bit to share your own stories, to record them. So one of the things I've done in the last few years is I took a bunch of videos of my dad, and I asked him, it's funny, he wouldn't talk about a lot of things, but if I asked him anything about being in the Navy, I got the best stories. So I have a bunch of videos of my dad telling Navy stories, almost exclusively. It was his favorite topic, and it was easy for him to remember. With my mother, I set up my brother and my mother to record over the phone answers to a whole series of questions that I sent both of them. So recordings of my mother and video of my father. Separate states, separate technology, but we captured some special memories. So I didn't do anything special here. I've learned to write and blog. I self-published the book. A lot of people have enjoyed it. I'm happy about that. And the reason why I'm listing three places up here, the Mystic Times, Stonington Times, well, I guess it's only two things. The third one's just a generic suggestion, is if you have something that you like to write about and you enjoy writing, I want you to know that the Stonington Times, the Mystic Times, Lee Howard, the editor, is always looking for stories. He would love to hear from you. I just want you to know that because he's actively looking for stories, and he would love it if you would submit them. It's very easy to do. And there we are. I thank you for coming. Does anybody have any questions? Oh, at least one. Thank you.
Yeah, when you were pulled up to the breakwater, and you're up on the bow trying to snag the line.
Yeah.
Who's running the boat?
Me.
From the front?
Yep.
Oh.
No. That particular picture is the boat I have right now.
Oh.
I have an open skiff with just like a little console, and we set it up. Remember the picture where we had just completely gutted the boat?
Yeah.
When we put the console back, we put it back so I could literally reach out and grab the buoy and the rope with the long pole and the hook, while I still had my hands on the gear and I could still control the boat. That was very much on purpose. My husband did this so I wouldn't be at home. In fact, I think all of this was triggered by me saying to him one day, it's kind of dumb to live at the shoreline and not be on the water. It's like, oh, okay. I guess that makes sense.
Do you find that it's getting harder to find lobster?
It is. Actually, the lobster that's inshore where I exclusively fish, the number of lobsters has dropped by at least 60 or 70%. There's
Wow.
very, very few out there. It used to be I'd go out and we'd get a decent amount of lobsters and it was worth doing. And honestly, it's almost not worth being out there anymore. It's not worth the fuel. People always say, oh, that must be great, getting all those lobsters. Must be cheaper, and I just laugh and laugh. And laugh. Wait, is it cheaper to take a motorboat out and get fish? Because it's comparable.
Yeah.
Actually, you got a better shot fishing.
Yeah.
So that raises the next question. Are you assigned a fishing location, or can you just
Anywhere.
find the water?
I can be anywhere as long as it's in Connecticut waters. I can't be past 3 miles out. I can't be in international waters or state water. I mean, it has to be Connecticut waters. So that gives me 3 miles from shore. But if you remember the picture of how close I am to New York and Rhode Island, I have to be careful where I put my gear. I am crammed in the bottom right-hand corner of the state. I can only go in one direction, and every place else I put my gear, I lost my gear. So I've started putting it where people would be afraid to bring their boats. It's more dangerous, but I get to keep my gear that way. So a couple of things that I figured out is if a single propeller motor goes over a buoy and a rope, it'll wrap around the propeller. But bigger boats, if there's 2 motors or more, it'll actually just cut the rope and they'll just keep on going. And I found that happen again and again and again. Now sailboats aren't a problem. They have those big keels, but they have nothing else down there to catch. So it could slide right over my gear and it wouldn't hurt anything. But I found that every place, there are other places I put my gear. I've lost my gear over and over and over again, so I've stopped doing it. In fact, we found people were stealing our lobsters, so I started actually locking the pots. We didn't do that this year, and so far we've only gotten a couple of lobsters. There's evidence that people have been tampering with our gear, which is completely illegal, but
I was going to say, isn't there like a code of ethics for that? I mean,
yeah, there are actually laws.
Yeah.
Not just ethics, there are actual laws. So
Yeah.
that didn't stop the commercial lobstermen from trying to intimidate me off the water. And I was shaking, but I was shaking because I was more mad than scared that day. If I had more sense, I would have been more scared because I was within 5 feet of of the breakwater. And him going by at speed could absolutely push me right into the breakwater. And at that moment, I was handling the gear and the boat was not, I was not handling the boat. I was just, because it was a quiet day, I didn't see the harm. So a couple of things. I'm not wearing a particularly cute outfit today. This is actually what I wear fishing. And I found out that wearing a rash guard meant I didn't get burnt so badly, and if it got wet, it dried off. The pants are special pants from Duluth Trading Company. They dry off if they get wet. I really appreciate that. I am very pale. I am from parts of Europe where I swear they must never have sun because I burn, burn, burn. So my legs never see the light of day. They're really never get uncovered. So I started wearing long pants and really ugly shoes. By the way, the other thing I found out, if you're just boating or you're just fishing, you don't get a lot of water on the deck. But when you're lobstering, you're making such a mess. And I didn't explain this earlier, I'll do this now. So when I'm pulling the buoy in, that rope, it's going through a buoy right at my face height, there's seaweed on that. And I've got seaweed flying at me and covering me, which is part of the reason why I smell so bad at the grocery store that man stepped away from me. So there are all kinds of reasons, but I will tell you that one of the things that's changed when I moved here is I started talking to the commercial fishermen. I admire them. They have a very hard job. There's more regulation and fewer fish, and life is very difficult for them, but it's in their heart and soul, and they don't want to not be commercial fishermen anymore. And those amazing scallop boats in Stonington Harbor are just the most phenomenal things. They had an open house a couple of years ago, and I got to go on the boat. They have an amazing galley, by the way. They must eat really, really well. But the scallop fishermen in New England actually got together and worked together to come up with rules that made sense. And as a result, that rebounded in a way the lobstering has not. And I don't have any explanation for that. One of the weird things that happened is when the water started warming up a little bit, just a little bit, black sea bass that were always in the Carolinas and Virginia started coming up here. They started showing up and people were just astonished, like, what are these fish doing here? And then we got more and more and more. Well, black sea bass really love juvenile lobsters, really love them. So as the black sea bass ate more and more juvenile lobsters, there were all kinds of factors, but that was one of the things that was a direct correlation. I'd catch a black sea bass and go to clean it and find 3 juvenile lobsters inside. It's like, well, there's 3 that won't grow to adulthood. I'll never get to eat those. So the ocean's changing, but it's just, I have so much more respect for the ocean, the ecology of it, and how extraordinary it is to just live here. I've really become sort of a cheerleader for the area and a tour guide for people.
To whom do you sell your lobsters?
I am unable to sell them because I have sport lobster license. That means I have to eat them or share them.
All right.
I've never taken a penny for any of my lobsters.
Right.
I did, however, take some tomatoes once from somebody's garden.
Different question. What engine do you have on your boat now?
A 175 horsepower Johnson outboard.
Yeah. Is that a 2-cycle engine or a 4-cycle? On the outboard, which is a 4-cycle engine, it's essentially cleaner. It has a separate loop system.
You know what, Noel? I am so grateful that I'm married to a mechanical genius with a very strong leaving the dock, and I always let him know when I get back in safe. And that makes a whole lot of difference in the quality of his day.
We have something in common, Elizabeth.
Can't be.
Yes, you've taken tomatoes from somebody's garden.
Well, in exchange for lobster.
That's a steal.
Shh, don't tell the state, that's technically getting paid.
Have you ever used pop-ups to discourage him from getting to the lobsters?
Uh,
To hide your floats?
No, but part of that is because where we put our pots, I don't know if I can get all the way back there, but sometimes the breakwater has so many floating lobster buoys, so many of them, that the other lobstermen, when they're checking the gear, will sort of push ours out of the way. We've thought about it, but if our pots are just a little bit below the water, it's very easy for a boat to go over it and not only get entangled or cut the ropes. That it's not worth it. We understand now that people are stealing from us, and we just have learned to live with it. You know, we try to bait at the last light and come out at first light, and it's not always convenient. And sometimes we just throw our hands up and say, we're not going to make it on the water until 9 or 10 today. If there's any lobsters in there, it'll be a miracle. It's okay. It's different now. You know, I had different ideas before I learned it from experience. That's all I'll say on the subject. Yes?
I was just going to say, are other people as honest as you are?
I have no idea.
I'm hearing the sides, and you were so specific about throwing things back.
She was saying
Oh,
that she
I don't
wishes
know. I
people
mean,
were more
you know,
honest.
anybody that fishes, there are some people that will keep something that's short, and I've never done it. I've just never done it. And I always thought, you know, karma, whatever. I just feel like it's better to just do the right thing for the right reason all the time. First, I don't have a great memory, so I don't want to remember things other than the truth. So it works out really well if I just do the right thing. And sometimes that means I go home and I don't have dinner. That's okay. I've also don't take home work, and that means I have hamburgers or spaghetti.
I'm reading the recipes in your book right now, and I want to know when we're coming over.
I didn't bring any food for you,
It's
sorry.
delicious. It looks good.
Yeah, some of the recipes are really, really pretty yummy. Yes.
About stealing lobsters out of somebody's pot. The rule in Long Island Sound used to be years ago, if you picked up somebody's pot, took the lobster out, you put in a bottle of Mount Gay rum.
Oh, I've never heard that. I've never found any alcohol in my lobster pots. I have no idea. So all I know is you know, this is somewhat a seasonal community to a certain extent. You know, the number of people in this area doubles, triples, quadruples, whatever in the summer. And you know, some of those folks just don't care. They just think, oh, it's just there, nobody will miss it. And they don't understand that it's really expensive and it's hard work and it's, you know, smelly and all those things. There's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears that goes into this weird hobby. And it's not as productive as it used to be, but it's always good exercise. Sometimes it's beautiful. Sometimes it's so scary that I shouldn't be out there. More than once I pulled one pot and said, you're out of your mind, and I've gone back in. You know, I go with an idea, you know, like the conditions on shore aren't the same as on the ocean. And the ocean changes, and all it takes is somebody with a big boat to go by, and there's a big wave, and get thrown into the breakwater. I have a friend of mine who was a nurse and a proficient boater. She was terrified to be on the boat with me when I was so close to the breakwater. She said, what are you doing right here? It's dangerous. I said, well, my gear's right there. She said, what are you doing? My gear's right there. This is what I do. She only went out with me once. That was it. Some people thought it was fun, and some people were terrified. It's okay. It's not for everybody. So, you know, I wrote it down because I thought, well, I'm having this cool experience. Like, I was over the age of 50 before I learned about tides, before I went kayaking or boating or fishing or any of these crazy things. And because I have a creative husband, I have this weird hobby, and it's been really fun. It has prompted me to write down the experiences. And frankly, I write about some of the goofy things I did too, because I made a lot of mistakes. Fortunately, none of them resulted in the the boat sinking. I was grateful for that. One of the things I wrote about is I was so annoyed by the sound of this incessant sound of that marine radio. So annoying when I just wanted to relax and fish. Until I listened to a small plane go down off Misquamicut Beach, 2 miles east of where I was fishing. And I thought, maybe I'll just keep that radio up and just get used to it. Think of it as an important safety feature instead of something just designed to annoy me when I'm trying to enjoy my peace and quiet.
Wow.
It's okay. I've learned. I've learned some things the hard way. None of them have involved me getting badly hurt, other than, lobstering and pinching my fingers. I think that's a pretty good track record, and I'm grateful for it. I have books for sale if you're at all interested. They're called Lobster Summer. And again, really originally wrote this just for my family. It's turned out to be a fun read for a lot of people. It's really a love letter to the area. And it lists my favorite places, things in the area, along with recipes and, again, my goofy hobby. So thanks for having me. This has really been fun. What a fun, thank you. This is the most questions I've ever had. You guys are great. I would love to come back and talk to you about something else. One more? One more.
Slide said you couldn't keep a lobster with a notch in its tail.
Oh, good catch. I did zip over that. So the commercial guys, if they pull a lobster up and she's an egger, they notch the tail. And if I pull something up and there's no eggs on it, if the tail is notched, I have to put that female back. Good catch. Good attention to detail, better than mine. And what's neat about that is that gives the lobster another whole season to not be harvested, so that more eggs can be distributed in the ocean.
Have you ever had seaweed round the prop?
Oh yeah.
I found a good way to get rid of that is just to engage reverse.
The big pile of it. Yeah, all kinds of yucky things have happened. And fortunately, no, I shouldn't. My husband did have to get in the water once, not me. I was really grateful because so far I've called twice because I was really in bad condition and I really needed help. And once I was right next to the breakwater and I threw my anchor out and prayed it would hold because the wind was coming and it was pushing me into the breakwater, and I was just a couple of feet from the breakwater. And somebody came out and helped me in time to undo that was when I wrapped the rope around my own propeller, which is just so dumb. But you know what? I'm hauling pots, I'm handling the boat, trying to not run over the lobster buoys and the ropes. I don't remember if I told you this. The rope that we use is sinking rope, and that's what you're supposed to use. Not everybody does, so some of the pots actually have rope that's floating on the surface, which is so hazardous. So again, pretty good track record. I'm still here. I still have a boat. I still have some lobster pots. And a lot of great memories.
How often do you go out?
Now I'm probably out twice a week. When I first started for a couple of years, I was out at least 3 times a week, which was really fun. And you're picking the good weather days too, and at the right time.
How long does it take you?
If all I'm doing is
How
checking
long
the
does it
pots
take to
and I'm
go
really
out?
fast, I can leave the dock, check everything, and if all the pots are in one place, which they're not always, I can get it all done in an hour. And the reason why I know this is there was one point where there was a rainstorm and it stopped, and there was another one coming in, and I raced to the dock at 25 miles an hour because we have slow roads around here. Got to the dock, raced out like 5 miles an hour, no wake zone. Got out, got my gear, checked everything, rebaited, did blah, 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 got back in, covered the boat, was 5 feet from my car when the rain came down. So I know I can do it in an hour by myself. I'd like to have help. More questions? You guys are great. I could be here for 2 more hours.
Is there a limit to how many pots you can have, and is there a license you have to get?
That is an excellent question. Yes, I have a sport license and my husband has a sport license. Each of us can have 10 pots. We've never had more than 10 out at one time. Because frankly, 10 for 2 people when one of us doesn't eat lobster is plenty. He grew up eating so much lobster, he can't stand it. Can't stand it.
In terms of flavor for lobsters, what size? You go to a restaurant, what size is the best
tender,
You know, pound and a half is great, but one of the things I learned